Hi, it's your favorite realtor, Rick Morton. I'm a real estate agent, been in the business. Well, actually, I've been in real estate for over 20 years from different aspects. I'm actually a realtor now, and I pretty much work with a lot of sellers, buyers from time to time, do a lot of investing.
Good morning. My name is Altavia Little. I am a realtor with CTA Home Group of Wyker Realtors. Been in the business going on 6 years. Love what I do. My ideal client would be buyers, sellers, investors, and people looking to start in assisted living, independent housing.
Hello, hello, wonderful people. My name is Miss Danisha, and I am known as a personal wealth shield advisor. I help people protect their assets, such as auto, home, commercial, and I help them build wealth through life strategies. And so connect with me so I can help you protect and grow your income.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Boston, owner of Law Office of Leah Boston LLC. I'm an estate planning attorney. I draft wills, trusts, and I talk about long-term life care planning with people like you.
All right. So now that the introductions are out the way, let's get to the conversation. So for those of you who are tuning in now, this is More Than the Mortgage Conversation panel. So we wanted to come together to be able to connect and share with you strategies and ways to protect your lifestyle, especially as a homeowner. There are certain things that you need to have in place long term to protect your lifestyle, as well as, hey, how can you turn one of your biggest investments into an asset, right? And so that's what this panel is here for. So let's get started with the first question. Why is this important? Let's start there, right? Why is this important? We all have our own reasons because we're all experts in our own field. So why is More Than a Mortgage important in understanding your real estate?
So the question is, why is this important? The information? I would say that it's important because the more information that you have, the better decisions you'll make. And the better decisions you'll make, the more you're able to plan and work the process versus guessing and just going with the flow. Because a lot of times that's where we move wrong and then we end up having to try to figure out ways to correct the mistakes that we had.
What's next after a mortgage is important because understanding that once you actually in the home, what your next move is going to be to be comfortable in your journey. Some people get into a property and they may want to stay in there and feel like it's their forever home, where you have others who may enter a property and want to stay there for maybe 2 to 3 years. So just getting an idea of understanding that you can actually benefit from getting that starter property. It does not have to be your forever property. You can actually take that property and let it be an asset for your family and create residual income, where you can actually take that property, take the equity out to use for a down payment for another property. You can actually take that home and you turn it into a rental property if that's something that you're interested in doing before you actually purchase your next property. So it just all depends what you're trying to do, but it does not mean it's the end. So we don't want people to be afraid to get mortgages or to buy assets because real estate is one of the biggest investments that you can actually purchase, but it has a lot of benefits.
Look, I love it because you and Rick just highlighted some very important parts, which is one, you need the education to make these decisions, right? You have these property or real estate portfolio, but you don't really know how to maximize it or even protect it long term, because that's where I comes into place, or even how to utilize it as an asset, right? I don't even think people know that, how to turn their primary home into an investment property or how to turn it into assisted living. Like, these are things that you can do to leverage one of the biggest investments that you purchase in your life. One of the things that you should do is connect with like-minded experts, realtors like Altavia and Rick, who specialize in these types of conversations and support. And where I come into play, which is, how do we protect your income, right? At the end of the day, you need money to protect your lifestyle, to protect when life is lifing, because life is going to always be lifing, never going to stop happening. But what I can say is, let's prepare for those unexpected events. The investment property had a water leakage. Prepare if, someone gets sick or diagnosed with cancer. How will your business or you continue to pay your bills every 30 days pop up, right? things are going to happen. And so one of the things that we can do is be more proactive about those unexpected things that comes up. And that's where insurance comes into place. That's where I come into place as far as a wealth shield advisor. And we're looking at all of your financial portfolio. So that way we can protect the lifestyle, the mortgage, and then along with protecting it, that's what Leah about to, because I'm about to pass the mic to her. Along with protecting it, we have to have a plan in place to pass it along.
So you've heard some wonderful statements about the realtors speaking about having to invest and accumulate wealth through real estate and investment properties. However, all of that can fall apart if you don't understand the legal side of it. So you can accumulate all the property that you want. You can have all of the beautiful financial profile and portfolio that you want, diverse accounts, all of that. But it will, I'm telling you, it will fail if you don't have a legal shield beside it. So she's a wealth shield advisor. I'm a legal shield advisor, I guess, in that sense, right, if you want to call it like that. So a little topic that I just want to pull into play. An example is something that's called heirs property. So heirs property is actually like tangled title. That's another word to call it. So you have a home and you've not done anything as far as the estate planning side goes, or you have all of these various properties and you've not put any legal documents together in order to ensure that this property passes with a clean title. What I mean by clean title is who owns the home? Who are the participants? How is the deed written? What type of deed is it? So if we don't have these legal documents like a will, a trust put together, or a individual that has these legal documents, all of this can fall apart because you will have a property and then someone passes away. And if they've passed away without any sort of estate planning documents, what's going to happen is if they have 5 children and one of the children is dead and you've got now 3 grandchildren, you've got 5 children, maybe 3 grandchildren, and all of these people have like a 25% or like a 10%, 3% interest in this one home. So now the government isn't able to say who owns this home, who, and one person may be paying the property taxes, but 10 other people have legal rights to this property. So it's like we're investing, we're like accumulating homes. However, if we're not correctly passing it, now we have an heirs property issue where one person may be living in that home, but 10 other grandchildren, aunts, uncles, nieces, or whatever owns or quote unquote has a property interest in this home. And now the government comes or an investor comes and sees that this one person has a 10% interest in this home and they want to buy this home and they want to buy your 10%. Now you've got a forced sale. Now you've got a partition issue where one person is now coming and saying, okay, I want to sell the property because we've got a tangled title issue. So from the legal side, it's great to accumulate. It's great to invest. It's great to have all that stuff, but it means nothing if you don't have the legal documents to say, this home is mine. I'm passing it to my granddaughter, or I'm passing it to my son or my family to share in 4 equal parts, and they can decide what they want to do with it.
I mean, you just sharing that whole thing. I wouldn't even want to go through all that. Like it sounds like a headache, honestly.
It'll fall apart. I'm telling you. Tangled title.
Tangled title. I like that. I'm about to steal that somehow. Tangled title. Leah, you hit it right on the point, which is have your stuff in order. Going back to my realtors, my question to you guys is, what is the common myth when it comes to maintaining your real estate properties long term? Because I know you guys help with getting them to the table, right? But you guys also own properties too. So what is the common myth that people run into in order to maintain their properties long term?
The common myth of once you buy a home, you don't pay more money. I think that's definitely a myth. Based off the taxes, you have to look into the taxes, how they change. That does cause an effect on your mortgage payment. That's one of the biggest myths. Another myth that you hear being out of a home is buying a home is hard and you need a lot of money. That's a big myth as well. You don't need a lot of money to buy a home. I don't want people to think they need to come out of their pocket with $50 million to go ahead and put down on the house. That's not necessarily the case. If they want to do it, they can, but that's a myth to believe that you have to have a large amount of money to purchase a home. Currently, there's a lot of programs for first-time home buyers and even secondary home buyers, repeater home buyers, where they can actually get grant money or down payment assistance or closing assistance. So there are programs out here that we can kind of specialize and work with you to get you in that property. So a lot of people that are interested in buying homes don't know that. So if you actually can buy your own property and pay your own mortgage, that's mandatory to do.
Wow. So I would say one of the biggest myths that I always hear is that you got to have perfect credit to do any of these things, actually, to purchase a home, to invest in properties, to do anything. And that's definitely not the case. You really have to have good leveraging in order to get in the process. The credit aspect, I mean, it's so much available money out here and different programs that the one thing I would always say is just if you're interested in making any kind of step, whether it's to buy your new home, get into investing in other properties, just find yourself a good real estate agent and start there, because what they'll do, they'll already have things in place for you to see where you are and can set up a plan for you to start making the necessary steps to do what you need to do. So don't let the myth of everything has to be perfect, because as everybody knows, we don't live in a perfect world. So nothing's going to ever be perfect, especially when you're dealing with financial things. So definitely, I would just say reach out so that you can get the information necessary so that you can get in the game, get some skin in the game, as we like to say. The credit score, well, that varies based on the different programs available. But I would say the last that I've heard from one of my mortgage partners was the 600s. They actually have programs in the low 600s to start out. So I guess that would probably be something that I would say based off of what I was told, because I don't do mortgages, so I don't claim they stuff.
So that actually goes into exactly what I was talking about with the tangled title. For those government programs, if the government can't identify who has clean title and who owns that home with those heirs property issues, now you may not be able to qualify for first-time home buyers programs or homestead exemptions. So if the government is unable to say who owns this land because they can't find the possible 13 people that have that 0.5% interest in the home, then we're now losing. And these programs are essentially cheat codes for community members. That's why it's really important on the estate planning side to get to those governmental programs that we're passing homes and we're passing real estate clean title.
Don't have a tangled title. Right. That's got to be on a hat or something. Don't have a tangled title. Right. Free money. Who don't want free money? Just don't have a tangled title. So, Leah, my question to you is, how does estate planning play a factor when it comes to taxes?
So that depends. That's the lawyer answer for everything. Well, the federal government, as of right now, gives you an exclusion of about $13 million. And for the state of Maryland, I'm licensed to practice law in the state of Maryland, so I will always be speaking in Maryland terms, unless otherwise I'm speaking overview. But in this particular case, I will be speaking for the state of Maryland. Maryland allows you an exemption of about up to $5 million. Now, that may change with the administration and things of that nature. It may even go up or it may lower. But as far as taxes go, for an estate plan, I would start talking about tax protection or asset protection and tax planning when your estate is reaching to the $5 million level. And then on the federal level, if it's reaching up to about $13 million. So if an individual comes into my office and their estate is worth about $800,000, we don't necessarily have to have that tax planning conversation in regards to asset protection, like setting up an irrevocable trust and things like that. However, if we're starting to if we're starting to sneak up into that $5 million, let's start talking about irrevocable trusts, possibly Medicaid planning if there is an individual that needs to possibly spend down funds in order to qualify for those governmental benefits. So normally the tax conversations with estate planning all depend on what the estate is worth. That's why I say it depends. And that's why estate planning isn't necessarily cookie cutter. It's very unique because some people will never reach that $5 million mark, but some people are way over that $5 million mark. So I guess to answer your question, it would depend. Taxes come into play with estate planning depending on what the worth of the estate is.
So add to this question. So for, let's just say our common folks, right? So they have a property that they own. Let's say it's paid off, right? And they pass away. What happened to the taxes on that particular property? How does that work?
So when a person dies, of course, the first person or the first entity that is going to be paid is the US government. You are not going like the IRS. You're not going to be able to avoid that. You're just not going to be able to. However, with like creditors and things like that, there are ways that you can minimize it. However, like I stated, you have $5 million worth of an excluded estate. So if we're not reaching that $5 million threshold, or if we are reaching that $5 million threshold, then yes, we are talking about tax planning, possibly in the form of an irrevocable trust. So when we talk about irrevocable trust, that means that we're taking the money, essentially that over $5 million or over $13 million. Now we're taking the assets in that estate, because that's what it is, and we're moving them into the irrevocable trust to now say, when I die, I don't own anything. The irrevocable trust owns everything, if that makes sense.
And will the trust pay the taxes?
So yes, so you still have to pay, but it's essentially, it's being removed from your estate. And that's when the trustee comes in and they're managing everything. You're not going to get away with not paying taxes, people. Like, we can minimize, but you're like, pay your taxes, okay? And I say that because taxes go to schools, taxes go to sidewalks, taxes go to governmental agencies. So stop trying to run from taxes. We can definitely minimize it, but stop trying to run from it.
You say minimize it because
Minimize, because we're not gonna completely eliminate.
Right. We can't eliminate it. I like to say taxes to me personally are like the biggest gangsters in the world because it's Uncle Sam. Right? Uncle Sam, it doesn't matter what you do in life. He's just going to always ask for his percentage regardless. It doesn't matter if it's a business, if it's a property, if it's you going to the grocery store, right? He is going to ask for his percentage. And so where I come into place is helping you minimize Uncle Sam. Like, literally, people don't know insurance. When you think about it, it's been around for over 100 years, and that is literally one of the financial tools where you don't have to pay taxes. And even when it comes to other financial portfolios, right? We know that at some point, if you really want to grow your money, you put your money in the market and you allow it to grow. And then when you allow it to grow in the market, Uncle Sam wants his percentage regardless. Insurance is leveraging you today, your life, your health, your circumstances today. And so when you put your money into a life insurance policy, as it grows, it is taxed advantage. It is tax free. And so, along with the estate planning, far as having those documentations in place, you also need certain tax advantages and certain policies in place so that way you can leave real generational wealth. Because a lot of times, especially when it comes to homeowners, they leave debt. Let's be honest, they leave debt. Debt don't die. That's the thing, especially in our community. In our community, we have homes in the family. People will purchase houses, but sadly to say, they go through probates because they did not have the financial, or the family did not have the financial means in place to keep this house long term. And now all the work that you did to get the house in the first place is out the window. Then we're not leaving the right things behind. And so insurance, and that's why I call myself a wealth shield advisor, is there to protect you against those unexpected events that pop up being a homeowner. It's there to leave generational wealth. It's there to pay off the debt, so that way we're no longer leaving debt behind. It's there to pay those estate taxes if need be, right? Because it's going to happen. And so long term, understanding and leveraging you are your best asset. That's literally what life insurance is. Leveraging you, leveraging your best asset.
If I decide to leave my home, if my grandparents decide to leave their home to me, and when they leave their home to me, it's not in I don't have a will in place. I don't have it's not in trust. So now they're just saying, hey, I'm now leaving this house to you. When they leave this house, particularly to that person, when they gain that house, do they now have to pay the taxes back from the time of them purchasing the home?
It depends on whether or not their name is on the deed. Let's just assume that their name isn't on the deed. There is something called a capital gains tax. And so with capital gains taxes, let me make sure that I'm saying this right. So the individual that, if you've put their name on the deed, the individual that takes it will not be able to benefit from not having to pay the capital gains tax. So say, for example, you buy a house for $200,000 in the year 2000, and then the house is now worth like $400,000, and they're trying to sell the house now for $400,000. You now have a capital gains tax that you're going to have to pay of $200,000. Depending on whether or not there was an estate plan in place, and whether or not the child's name was on the deed, which is why I personally think, depending on the circumstances, you should or should not add your child's name to a deed. Normally, I would say don't add your child's name to a deed, because that $200,000 tax that you would have to pay, depending on how the estate plan is put in place, you won't have to pay that capital gains tax. But like I said, this all depends on what the certain circumstances are and how the estate is set up, how the deed is set up, whose name is on the deed, etc. Normally, though, yes, you do have to pay your taxes on the property, etc. However, there are ways to mitigate it or minimize it by taking advantage of that step up in basis, which is avoiding the capital gains tax. I hope I answered that a little bit correctly, but taxing and all that stuff that you do still need, I will say, as an estate planning attorney, you do still need to get other tax professionals included as well. So whether that be an accountant or just a financial advisor or an actuary that's able to see how the taxes and inflation and all that stuff comes into play.
Piggybacking off what you said, that is also a good myth that putting your child's name on the deed. I don't recommend it. And as a real estate agent, we don't recommend that, because let's say that person now decides to go out and want to use grant money to be a first-time home buyer. They're no longer able to do so because their name is already on a deed. So they're not going to be considered a first-time home buyer. So it's not recommended that you put another person on the deed unless, again, you guys are married or there's other reasons behind it. But if you're planning on buying a property later or at some point in your life, and you want to take advantage of the programs as a first-time home buyer, you're not going to deed with someone else's.
So this is a common question that I always get with dealing with people purchasing homes. And it's like when you have a couple that's not married, you already know where I'm going with it. Right. And it's always the debate of if they both should go on the title or how they should deal with it. And I know we always suggest, like you were just mentioning about the trust and stuff like that, but I'm just saying, like, typically speaking, what would you say your take would be?
All right, so before Leah answer her question, I just want to add to the whole child situation while we're on that topic. Don't put your children as a beneficiary on your life insurance either. And the reason why is because those funds will not be accessed until they turn 18 years old. So, prime example, let's say you have a policy in place for mortgage protection, right? And you were to pass away and you have a 10-year-old child and they are the beneficiary. Technically, that 10-year-old child will not get the money until they turn 18. And then now it's not being used for the purposes of paying off the mortgage to sustain that lifestyle that you're creating for that child. So if you are married, obviously I encourage you to do your spouse, or if you're not married, you have children, I encourage you to put someone that you trust as a beneficiary. And then that's where you put Leah in place to give them directions on the money.
Just to follow that as well, children are legally not able to contract. There is something called a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. However, you would have to get a guardian in place, and no one wants to go through guardianship proceedings and all that stuff. That's court costs, that's getting an attorney involved, and depending on if multiple people have their hand out to help the child, or the judge, because the judge is always going to look at who has the best interest of the child. And just going through that whole process is it can be horrific for the child, but also, like you said, that money's just going to sit there. So instead of like using your children as beneficiaries, definitely choose someone that you trust, or we start going through the estate planning process and seeing how we can do that. Back to your question about titling like two people that aren't married, correct? So in the state of Maryland, the default is when two individuals that are married are purchasing a house, that deed is going to be held as tenancy by the entirety, as I'm sure you all know. If two individuals are purchasing property, depending on the relationship of the individuals, they can either have a tenants in common or they can have a joint tenants with the right of survivorship. Because they're not married, they're not going to be able to have access to that tenancy by the entirety. So I would say, depending on the relationship, depending on if it's someone that you trust and y'all know y'all have a good relationship, why not just do joint tenancy with the right of survivorship? Because joint tenancy with the right of survivorship is a property that's going to pass without having to go through the probate process. And that property, let's say two people own a house, joint tenancy with the right of survivorship. That means when the first person dies, that property is just going to automatically go to that other person. So if y'all have a good relationship, y'all are life partners, you know there's nothing funky going on, there's no children possibly, or if you share the same children, sure, why not? However, if this is just you going in with like a friend or you going in with like a business partner, I would always recommend tenants in common, because at that point you can still pass your half to the people that you want it to go to. But if you have two people that it may be like funky, like I'm not going to do joint tenants with the right of survivorship with my friend. I would do joint tenancy with the right of survivorship if I were, well, obviously if I were married, it would be tenancy by the entirety. But if I were to do it that way, I would deed it with like my brother or something, like my brothers or something like that, or my parents, because we're all upon the same line. But for deeding purposes, I would say it would depend on the type of relationship that you have with that person.
Yeah, you got all the information. All right, we're gonna switch it up a little bit. So, my question is to Altavia and Rick. So, what do you recommend to someone? Let's say we have a first-time home buyer, and they at some point want to maybe turn their property into an investment option or assisted living. Like, what would be the best suggestion that you would give to someone that wants to really turn their property into an asset instead of a liability? And for those of you who don't know what an asset and liability is the asset is now the property is going to pay you. Liability is coming out of your money, right? So now we want to have it where the property is going to pay you. So what strategies and things would you suggest for that type of person who wants to get into that field?
Knowing what direction you want to go. That's number one. Doing your research, educating yourself in the background of what you're looking to start. You can do assisted living, you can do transitional housing, you can do substance abuse housing, transitioning from coming from jail, veteran homes. There's just so many options that are available. We even have room sharing now. So we have so many options that are available, but you have to figure out your niche and what you're comfortable with. That's a big thing. Because you may say you want to do assisted living, but You have levels with assisted living. You have level 1, 2, and 3. So a level 3 client is someone that's maybe bedridden and they're unable to take care of themselves. So is that someone that you really are comfortable with being responsible for 24 hours a day? Actually having that panel, actually having a situation where you're saying you want to do assisted living, but you kind of figure out you want to do all men or you want to do all women. Me personally, I don't do women. I prefer all men properties, just because I feel like men are a lot easier when it comes to their vice, whatever it is they like. Give them some food, give them their cigarettes, they comfortable. Whereas the women, they want their boyfriends to come over, they want their kids to come stay. They don't know how they feeling tomorrow because I don't know how I feel tomorrow. So I know dealing with their personalities, it's just not for me. So just always getting the education of understanding what it is that you want to do and educating yourself there, and actually taking the time out to set it up for that particular process. Going out, doing that research, getting information, and assessing your clients. Do not let anyone in your home. Assess them to make sure they're a good fit. That is number one. Do not just lead with the money. So with assisted living, you're gonna need to be certified. You're gonna also have to do an 80-hour course. You're gonna need an alternate manager and a manager. That's number one. Then you, yes, and you also gonna need 24-hour staff. You're gonna need a delegated nurse. Yes, but with assisted living, let's say with a transitional house, that's not necessary. You don't have to have 24-hour staff. You don't have office healthcare quality over top of you. So it just depends on what you're comfortable with. You don't have to do an activity calendar, whereas assisted living activity calendar is mandatory. Medication being monitored is mandatory. Having that delegated nurse is all mandatory.
So, to piggyback off of what she was saying, the number one thing I would probably say is, as you're starting to search other ways to profit from your property, I would think about your lifestyle first, because whatever you decide to do as your next step, you have to also have it to be able to fit into your lifestyle. So all the different options I would definitely consider and see how it meshes with your current lifestyle or what you would like your lifestyle to be moving forward.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm going to add to that is it doesn't matter what direction you go in when it comes to profiting on your property. Make sure you got the right insurance in place. Make sure you got the right insurance in place. That property can go up in smokes, but if you did not let that insurance company know that it's an assisted living there, or now it's an investment property and you don't live there, the insurance company can decline that claim because you did not disclose what is happening on that property and you don't have the right insurance in place. And anything that you do, if it's a business, if it's getting additional property, in my eyes, I like to say my wealth shield advisor eyes, you have gaps, you have risk. There are things that can happen that can just jeopardize this whole lifestyle that you're building or business that you're building. And so that's where I come into place to cover those gaps, right? So you have a challenging tenant that's just put holes in the wall and, started a fire and things like that. That is a liability issue. And so that can affect you tremendously. Imagine having to pay out of pocket to take care of these things. That's where insurance comes into play. So that way we can minimize what actually comes out of your pocket because you already had a proactive plan in place, because we know that life is going to be life and we can't control people. That's why you have to have a full robust of certain things and insurance and documents in place to protect the business, the lifestyle, and the goals. Because all it takes is just one situation for it to just kind of mess you all up. And even I'm gonna add to this because I'm thinking about my cell phone, y'all, because it's broke. It broke. But when I lost my cell phone, broke, it messed me up completely because this is my life, right? It's my lifeline. Fortunately, I was able to upgrade and replace it, but financially, mentally, it messed me up. It threw me off. So imagine when those things arise, you don't want to have to worry about how I'm about to pay for it because you already emotionally going through the process, right? But you already have a plan in place to say, okay, well, at least I don't got to worry about, if I got the money to take care of it because I had a wealth shield advisor like Danisha to cover those gaps. And it just gives you, at the end of the day, the peace of mind that you need to really leverage your property and leverage your lifestyle and even grow it at the end of the day. Because that's the thing about our community, and that's going to be my next question is, what advice would you give to our community? Because I feel like in our community, we are the least wealthiest. Let's talk about it. Like, we are the least wealthiest. We are one of the ones that we know the information, but we don't implement the information, or we want to be scared and freeze and not do certain things. We are quick to be reactive instead of proactive, and we can open it up for the audience to talk.
So I do have a quick question. I just want to make sure that I get it out because some people may be wondering. For the first home buyers program, I know you stated that a common myth, and definitely to get back to your question, I know you stated that a common myth is that you don't need a lot of money. It is a myth that you don't need all of this money to put a down payment on a house. So what would you all say from your experience, if you've worked with any individuals that are taking advantage of the first home buyers program, what would you say on average would be a down payment that they would need? Are we thinking about like $20,000, maybe more? Like, what would you say on average?
Down payment always goes based off of the kind of financing they're doing. If they're using FHA, conventional VA, all these things make a difference. Where if you're using a VA loan, they're going to cover your down payment. A lot of first-time home buying programs with FHA, they do cover a lot of grant money that you can kind of qualify for first-time home buyers. It just depends on the lender that you use and so forth, or if you qualify. That's number one. But for me personally, I deal with a lot of first-time home buyers, and I'm really big on trying to save them money. My biggest quote is saying, hey, let's use that money towards furniture versus down payment. I try to tell my clients, again, this is everyone's situation is different. Everyone's house or what they're looking for is different. But a lot of my first-time home buyers, they're looking in the price point between $200,000 to no more than about $500,000. That's normally what they start at. So with that being said, I always say, hey, you can try to come up with about $8,000. This is me. I will say, come up with like $8,000, have that saved, have a credit score of at least a 640, and we can try to get something happening. Getting started, you're going to put your earnest money deposit down on the property. Earnest money, you're looking at, they want you to at least put 1% down. So 1% of your purchase price. So if you put down your earnest money deposit, then you have a home inspection. Your home inspection is going to cost you about another between $300 to $600 for your home inspection. You're going to pay. You're not getting that back. Then you pay for the appraisal. The appraisal another $600. So you look at all these things you're putting out up front is to get you to that finish line, and you're paying this money within the course of that first 30 days before you actually close on that property. That myth. So understanding that you don't need a lot of money, as I said, and I'm saying that from experience. Me buying my first property, I actually purchased a duplex. Me purchasing that duplex, I put $1,000 down. That was it. I put $1,000 down. The property was worth $174,000. This home is now worth $380,000. So I have only equity in the property, but the state of Maryland covered my entire down payment. The seller covered all of my closing. So I had to come to the table with exactly $1,000, and that is it. The myth and the idea of educating our people to say, hey, is opportunity, is chances out here for them to be homeowners. And for a lot of single women, I notice, are afraid to actually go out and purchase a home by themselves because they feel like, okay, who am I going to have to help me maintain this property? So as you both say, you guys are protectors. That's what we try to teach our clients as well. We're protecting them in the idea of understanding there are things that are in place for them to feel protected along the way. So home warranties is something that we recommend. If you actually have a home, we'll get that home warranty. That home warranty is going to be your maintenance man. They're going to work as your maintenance man. So if something goes wrong with your roof, if something goes wrong with the furnace or the boiler, these things are now covered for the most part if you have that in your plan. So that is something that we normally try to push to tell homeowners. These are situations that you can kind of, insecurity pieces that you'll have so to feel secure in your home purchase.
But what I will say that as far as the question was how much of a down payment they should have.
Yeah, I think people are like afraid to go into the home buyers process because they may not understand or they may not know how much do I need? Or I know I don't have enough money, so I'm not even going to look to try to buy a house. So it's like, if they're of an understanding that there are programs out here to help you with that, in addition to what you may need to come to the table with, what would you say in your experience would be some down payments?
Well, what I would say is definitely reach out to a professional because the typical things that we look at. There are also a lot of other things that's available that may not require you to even have a down payment. And I'm just speaking from a couple of experiences that I had. But on these transactions, I was the listing agent, and I had a property that was listed for I think it was like 280, and the program that they actually went through was through Baltimore City, and they ended up having a mortgage, qualifying for a mortgage for only like $50,000. The grant programs that they went through paid for everything else. And I wasn't even aware of this program at the time. So the bank itself, I got really cool with that loan officer because I'm like, hey, you know a lot that I don't know. But it's like, I think it was called the land trust or something that most people don't know about. So I'm just saying that to say that it's a lot of opportunities, and the only way that you'll know about it is to inquire because it's not always. I mean, each transaction with us, a lot of times we look at it as a different transaction because people's situations vary. But it's a lot out here, and it's a lot available. You just got to reach out to us.
So definitely get the information. That's number one. But there are programs, as he said, that we can kind of stack on top of each other. And I actually had clients myself, whereas though they actually got money back at the closing table. So they were able to use programs on top of programs. A hero, they can be a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, and they're considered a hero, so they get grant money for this. First-time home buyer money, far as a down payment assistance program. And you can use all this money and stack it on top of each other, where at the table, you may have to come to the table with $2,000, but now you don't have to pay anything.
Oh wow! And
So
I never even heard. So it's called a hero grant.
So as a hero, yeah, you have so many grants.
You
Even
don't know what you don't know.
Even as a student, I actually have a program right now. If you have that far as your loans, the state of Maryland will actually cover up to 80,000 of your student loan money, and you can actually put that as a down payment towards you buying your first time home. But you have to have a 700 credit score for that program.
I mean, so, and the thing is, I've also gone through, I've shared with you guys, I don't know if everyone know, I bought my house at 22. And when I bought my house, some of the banks, actually my credit union, gave me a beautiful grant to help close on my house. And I think I walked away with only paying $1,500 to $2,000 to get my house. And I was a 22-year-old young girl, I know. So my question to you guys is, let's talk about being house broke. Right. So what is a way, or what do you suggest to not be house broke? And for those of you who don't understand, house broke is you got the house, but you don't have the money to maintain it, right? Because it's more than just, that's why we're here, right? It's more than just the mortgage. It is, how do you maintain this house long term? And so what do you recommend to homeowners so that way you don't be house broke?
Number one is the first step is when you talk to that lender, they're actually going to give you an idea of understanding what you can afford. That's number one. They're going to actually tell you what you can afford. That does not mean that you get that pre-approval and you have to go to the max of, if you get a $200,000 pre-approval, you have to get a home in that price point. But the lender will decide to say, okay, this is what you're comfortably can afford in a mortgage. But once you're actually in the home, you need to actually figure out a budget that, far as your household needs and your expenses of what you, far as your wants as well. So actually coming up with a financial plan is number one. A lot of people don't know too, in a homeowner period, when you purchase a home, going in, you may not pay a mortgage for the first 2 months. Whereas though, if you're renting a property, you pay your rent up front. But when you own a property, you pay on the back end. So that is giving you at least 2 months cushion to say, okay, now you have some time, some money to save. That home warranty is saving you money because, again, if something breaks in a property later on, you're now have that comfortability of saying, hey, this is what I need to fix. I don't have to come out of my pocket and spend $500 on a new boiler or $600 on a new boiler because you actually already have it in your home warranty. So it's just depending on understanding that it's necessary to put things in place up front, what we were telling the entire time, to shield you from these mistakes or mishaps later on. So just having a cushion of understanding, trying to save, is a necessity.
What I would suggest is I would make myself familiar with all the classes that are available from your Home Depot and your Lowe's every Saturday on how to maintain, how to maintain your home. Exactly, because it's a lot of things that they teach for free, and it's mostly every Saturday. And these are ways that you can save money and add value to your property as well at the same time. I guess that's the man in me that makes me want to think of ways to not have to spend money to try to get it done anyway. But I think to add on to the financial part of it, you know, the more money you're going to be able to hold on to is how much you're going to be able to save. So that would be my suggestion.
And I'm even going to add to that, which is prepare for things that you know is going to happen, right? As a homeowner, I've been in my property for 10 years. There are things that's just going to happen organically. You know, the roof is going to need to be replaced at some point. You know that the bathrooms are going to get upgraded at some point. The kitchen, I don't care if it's 20 years from now, 30 years from now. A lot of times when we have those moments of like, oh, this is now starting to run down, what do we do first? Go to the bank. And now we're getting out the equity of the property and we're using it for the upgrades of the home. Now you're putting yourself in more debt, essentially. And so instead of you putting yourself in more debt to upgrade your house, come up with a plan, maybe get a life insurance policy that has been accumulating for the last 20 years. And now you're pulling from the policy instead of going to the bank. Now you are your own bank, essentially. And you've been preparing for the fact that at some point, hey, the roof is going to need to be replaced. Replacing a roof is $10,000 to $20,000. A lot of times people don't have that in their bank account, just sitting there to replace, or if they do, it will wipe out their whole savings. Start preparing for the things that is going to organically happen as a homeowner. Think big picture, long term, like how do you maintain this house for the next 10 years, 20 years, at least 30, because that's how long the mortgage is, right? You are in a financial commitment for the next 30 years. So how do you maintain that mortgage? And even to this, I'm going to add to this story. I had a couple, husband and wife, because this also goes along with not being house poor, right? Because things are going to pop up. Husband and wife was diagnosed with cancer, actually. What does the husband do? He does what the best man could do, which is quit his job and take care of his wife. But with that came with them pulling money from their retirement portfolio to maintain their lifestyle, pay their mortgage, and then also to take care of the wife in her treatment. And so fortunately now she is in remission. And so they no longer have to worry about, the cancer piece of it, but financially they're in a hole. Financially, they are now having to start over. And so imagine all these years you have worked and then life just happens and now the money is gone and you're in your 50s. You don't have another 30 years to work and build that back up. But in another world, what if they had a life insurance in place that they could have pulled from instead of their retirement portfolio? And now they're able to enjoy retirement instead of now having to scramble and figure out how they're going to pretty much live, essentially. So a part of minimizing being house poor is looking at your finances, just like Altavia said, and looking at your finances from big picture, like wide scope out from the beginning to the end, even retirement, right? What does your retirement look like? You might, oh, my house is going to be paid off by then. Okay, great. But what does your retirement look like? Will it still be able to pay the maintenance of maintaining this house, right? Will it still be able to take care of your lifestyle long term? So look at big picture and have a financial plan in place to maintain your lifestyle, which is being a homeowner.
What we're doing, we're talking about preserving, we're talking about being proactive. And being proactive on the front end makes it less costly on the back end. As far as estate planning goes, as far as the legal side goes, you've done all this and you've accumulated all of this wealth, but if something were to happen, you were to be in the hospital or pass away without any estate planning documents in place, now all of those properties are going to have to go through probate. All of those probatable assets, I guess, are going to have to go through the court process. Your children, if you have any minor children, you may have to go through the guardianship process. And it is more costly on the back end to deal with the judicial process than it is to deal with a lawyer on the front end and being proactive, putting things in place. This is where I want my properties to go. I don't want my properties to go through the probate process, so I want to set up a trust. Or I don't have a problem with my property going through the probate process because I have a small estate in my family. There are no familial issues, but I still want to make sure that there's no tangled title issues. So I'm going to pass my home by way of a will, or I'm going to set up a life estate deed because I don't want to go through the probate process, etc. So there are many different things that you can do on the front end to prepare yourself so you're not spending money on the back end. I think that's why this is really important. And if we just start talking about it, normalizing being proactive, normalizing doing things on the front end, we can really save ourselves a lot of money when crisis happens. And we can preserve our properties, we can preserve our real estate, cars, all of that stuff. We can preserve it if we have a proper plan. Like you said, working with professionals. Stop trying to buy a home by yourself. There are grant programs. Like I didn't even know about the hero program about being a teacher, nurse, etc. Like I didn't even know about that. But work with professionals who are there. They go through the training and the education to be able to help you save money on that end. Y'all helping people save money on the real estate end. I'm trying to help you save money on the probate side of not having to hire a probate attorney if something were to happen, or go through the guardianship process, because you're paying by the hour, and those attorneys are about $250 to $500 an hour, versus like dealing with an estate planning attorney, particularly if you're in the state of Maryland, Law Office of Leah Boston LLC. You're paying for a flat fee. Working with a real estate investor, and you may get free money. You know what I'm saying? So that's why we're here, and that's why we're trying to stress why this is so important.
Absolutely. And to add to this, and then I'm going to open up the floor to if there's any questions. Once you do better with your finances, your education, your lifestyle, then it passes along to the next generation. It breaks that cycle, right? Because a lot of times we learned the hard way. Let's be honest. In our community, we learn the hard way when it comes to a lot of stuff. So to really make sure that your loved ones or your kids don't go through what you had to go through, then that's why it's good to have connections and people like this, so that way we can educate you, and then you can educate the next generation, and then it goes on, and then now those same problems that you were dealing with is different couple generations because it started with you. That is essentially why we're here, is to help the next generation. I know that we have a couple of people out here in the audience. Did you guys have any questions before we wrap up? Sure.
So we're looking to move. I've been in my house for probably about over 10 years. So I don't know, is there like a limit to when you can be a first home buyer again?
You are, as a first time home buyer, you technically can be considered a first time home buyer again after 10 years, but you technically can't. It's kind of weird. It just depends on how you go about it and what you're using. As a first time home buyer, if she's never purchased a home before, she will be considered a first time home buyer. So if she goes on on a loan as a first time home buyer, she will be a first time home buyer. If you guys going together, no, you would not be a first time home buyer. But now been so much time, they can still qualify you on that loan as such. So you'll still, and that on that loan, and after 10 years, yes, you will be still looked at as the first. You could be looked at as the first time home buyer, but she will always be looked at as the first time home buyer. But I will always talk to my lender first when you guys do the applications, and they can tell you what's the best route to go about it. If to keep her just on the loan by herself, or to add you guys as a combined party. Because even in your current property, you now have the option to say you want to rent that out and use that extra income to use towards, now to say that you have the extra money to use as far as the new home, and your loan officer can actually use that income. Or you can say you want to sell a property. If you want to sell a property, you now got money coming from that home that you can use towards the next house as well. So it just depends on your route and what you want to do. Answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do taxes, so I'll admit, I'm not versed on trust. I'm not
Okay.
versed on trust. You mentioned about land trust. I guess if you have not a little more.
So actually, the land trust that I was speaking of is kind of like, I guess to give you a better understanding of it, it's more like a grant program. And the one that the person who purchased the property I was selling, used was specifically for Baltimore City. I am aware that there's others, like in the surrounding states, that we're able to use here in the state of Maryland. And what they do is they'll take your current situation and factor that all in, and then they'll figure out what you're available to receive. And a lot of those trusts you're able to, like she said, pile up other grants and things on top of it to get more money. And that's how that particular person was able to purchase that home and pay so less money for it.
Always think to you, I want you to shop with your lenders because all programs, all lenders don't use. So you want to find out from that lender what programs they offer you and what you can actually benefit and stack on top of each other and so forth. But always know that you have a 30-day window. So your pre-approval is good for 90 days. But let's say you start with one lender and you feel like that lender doesn't, you found another lender that has more options. I want you to shop around. It's going to be okay. It's not going to affect your credit. What's going to happen is they're going to pull your credit one time. And when they pull your credit that one time and now you shop with another lender, it's not going to hit your credit again. It's still going to be the same pool. Similar like if you go to a car dealership, yeah, within that 30 days. So you can kind of shop around and say, hey, this lender has this program, whereas this lender does not. Or this lender is giving me a lower interest rate, whereas this lender is not. So it's just always an option. I would recommend always shopping around so they can get you your best benefits.
As she was saying, to shop around with lenders, but normally what we'll do is if we like, I guess, recommend the partners that we use, we'll a lot of times give you like different lenders that normally have different things going on so that you can reach out and see the comparison and see, what programs and things that interest you that you may be able to connect.
We're not going to throw you to the wolves and tell you got to find me. So we will give you options.
Go for it. Yes. That's why we're here.
Big house, right? So I guess that's one of the apprehensions of actually buying a new home right now, right? Because, like I said, I purchased my home over 10 years ago, and like right now my mortgage is like $1,000, right? So I know that any house that I buy in this current market, that's going to go from like at least double, right? I know it's just reality. Any tips on like how to mitigate that? Like I know that probably gonna like sell this house, maybe put the money into the other house or something like that. But is there any other options where if I can mitigate that or brace for that big increase?
So for me, I would say leverage your dollar. Leverage your dollar. At the end of the day, you know what your income is. And a lot of times, things pop up, things happen. And so having something in place, you don't have a separate account or a separate portfolio just for the house itself. That's what I recommend. A lot of times people have a savings account, but that's a savings account for their whole life. They need something completely separate just for the house. Even leveraging your dollar, as I said earlier, using other financial tools than what you're used to. So like the life insurance piece to be that part of growing your money. So like prime example, I had a client actually, she purchased her house. I'm trying to think, she was in her 50s when she purchased her house. And so one of her biggest concerns was, I'm going to be retiring in about 10 years. How do I maintain this house? What do I need to have in place? Because my retirement is not going to be enough to maintain this lifestyle. So after I looked at all of her portfolio and looked at her finances, her retirement, how much she's paying for the mortgage, right? Came up with a plan. And so one policy is going to pay off her student loans and her house in 15 years instead of 30. And so instead of her paying extra money on her loan, right, which is only leveraging your dollar once, now she's putting that payment into a policy that's leveraging her dollar twice because it's in the policy growing in the market or at a compounded dividend growth. And now it's being used in the real world. So now it's being used twice. And she's still able to accomplish her goals. And then the second policy, after looking over her Social Security and how much Uncle Sam is going to be taking out during her retirement portfolio, I gave her an additional $40,000 tax-free to her retirement portfolio. So now As a homeowner, she had a plan in place. Had a plan in place to pay off her house sooner. Also, worst case scenario, if something were to happen to her, we have access to these policies to pay off her house and maintain her lifestyle. And then now I'm going to be referring her to Leah because now she needs to make sure that that money has direction afterwards. But just having a plan in place and budgeting can go a long way to for you not to be house broke, because things are just going to pop up. I mean, you said you've been in the house for 10 years, right? Things happen. The banister could fall, just things are just going to happen on its own, and you're not going to go to your home insurance or your home warranty, because at the end of the day, home insurance is not a maintenance policy. Something needs to happen. Even the home warranty has limitations. These all have limitations. There are always going to be a responsibility to you as a homeowner to cover those gaps, because somebody got to pay the bill. So my goal is to help minimize what comes out of your pocket and have a plan in place for the insurance to pay it long term.
What I would suggest is, considering your current situation, is maybe look at the differences between you turning your current property into something that can gain more income for you, or versus what you'll get for selling it. Because when you compare the two, you'll be able to see another avenue as far as how much money is available on each side of that coin, and then you can figure out what's going to be more beneficial to you moving forward. That may help you leverage the difference between the increase in your next mortgage that you said you're about to pay double because you're gonna get the pool and all the other extra stuff.
Or just leverage yourself as well, coming up with that plan. So with a first time home buying grant, you can actually get up to 4 units with some programs. So what I did was I actually bought a multi-unit. So I lived in one unit, and while I lived in one unit, guess what? I had all my other tenants live in the other units, and they're now paying my mortgage. So I'm living rent free. So there's different avenues that you can kind of go about it or what you want to do, and that can actually increase your dollar.
All right. So we're going to come to a close. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and just go down the row, and you guys can just share some type of tip or something that you would like the audience to take away.
The main thing is, I would say, is the whole purpose of what we're doing is for you to know that it's very much required for you to obtain information, and it's so much out here that's available to you, and the information itself will also help guide you, help you prepare your plan, and you'll be able to make the most of your decisions that you're looking to do moving forward.
In closing, my name is Altavia. I'm a White Creek Realtor with Integrity PTA Home Group. So if you need any information as far as home buying, the home buying process, and information, we are a team. So we all about working together, leveraging each other, and showing each other what's needed so we can kind of get to that next step.
Hello, wonderful people. It's your personal wealth shield advisor, Miss Danisha. So I am going to stick with the same theme that I've been saying, which is be proactive and not reactive. Have a plan in place. Think outside of the box. We have a traditional way of thinking when it comes to finances. Think long term. How can you maintain your finances long term? How can you maintain your lifestyle long term? So I encourage you, to connect with a wealth shield advisor like myself to help minimize the biggest gangsters in the world, which is Uncle Sam, right? Uncle Sam is the biggest gangsters. So let's start to build your tax-free bucket. When you start building your tax-free bucket, you have more power over your finances. And that's what the goal is at the end of the day.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Leah Boston. I'm owner of Law Office of Leah Boston LLC. I specialize in estate planning, and I just want to leave you with one statistic. Around 16% of Americans will come in contact with the criminal justice system and need the defense of a criminal defense attorney. 100% of us are going to die. And for that reason, 100% of us need an estate planning attorney, because you are not going to avoid the courts. You are not going to avoid, or even if you try to avoid the courts, somewhere down the line, your children or your children's children are going to cry because you didn't put something in place on the front end. And that's where I come in, specializing in estate planning. I draft wills, trusts, and I help with long-term life care planning with people like you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to More Than Just a Mortgage. Have a good one.